Bippity boppity boo, Devlog for you! And welcome back to Devlog. In the last part, I discussed the mechanic for the next future level, and in this part, I'm going to actually discuss the design process and visual design of my silhouette bug level. The bug level called Bug Brutality, which was originally Beast Brutality, has a very interesting visual design to it, this being everything being a silhouette aside from the player and backgrounds, and then the backgrounds being a brighter green color and the bug enemies being a variety of colors. This is for multiple reasons. The bugs have to be a variety of colors because I thought that would be visually more interesting and make them visually stand out amidst the silhouetted level. And secondly, I never really had an idea of what the actual visual design of the bug or beast brutality would be. I always kind of envisioned that it would be the trash trail level tile set but at night time, but I thought that would be too boring, so I just made this level that is more stylistically based on a silhouette and has more of a actual visual design more based on color scheme. So it's very color scheme heavy, and I quite like that in the level design. It also meant I didn't have to draw any additional sprites because in the creation of Pep-Pel, I have drawn a very large amount of sprites and sprite shapes, and a lot of these are very largely unused, or only used in one very small section of a level. For example, the first level, the trash trail, has 3 different tile sets that are entirely unused because I just used them for foreground elements and then never actually used those in level because they didn't turn out to look very good. So I could reuse those sprites and those tile sets in this level and they still have a unique look to them, and they don't have to fit any specific stylization because they are just a flat silhouetted look. This saved a significantly large amount of time in actually designing the level because I didn't have to make the actual visuals any organized, logical thing. I just had to make something that looked nice as a silhouette and would read nice as a level. So a lot of the level has this naturey sort of look in the silhouette. I reuse a lot of tree sprites, I reuse a lot of grass sprites, and I like to make a lot of the actual visuals stacked up objects with twigs and leaves, so it has this messy visual to it still. It still looks very similar to the trash trail, but it has its own visual level identity, I feel. Then additionally, I reuse the tar spikes and the vine spikes from the Aquatica Boid and the trash trail respectively. I color these bright orange to make them stand out, and I use these as hazards in the level. I think the comparison of the very dark silhouetted level with the very bright orange spikes really stands out very well and looks very visually interesting in the level. I like the fact that the level is very silhouetted and there's not a lot of color, so whenever there is color, I think it looks very nice in the level. The backgrounds I think stand out very well with the color. The hazards, for the same reason, stand out very well, being the only color in a level that is primarily silhouetted. Next, onto level mechanics. As foreshadowing for my next level, the space level, I once again made a level with one specific mechanical idea, this being the bug Boid objects that chase the player around, and then got halfway through the level and realized this was far too basic of a mechanic to have the entire level based around. As always, Pep-Pel levels are very long, so I like to keep it complicated with the number of mechanics I actually involve in the level, which means that just one mechanic does not really make sense or feel engaging to me in a level design. But this actually provided ample opportunity to reuse a lot of old mechanics that I made in the very beginning of Pep-Pel's development. If you've seen all of Pep-Pel's videos, and I know my viewer drop-off rate, you haven't. If you have seen all of the old Pep-Pel videos, you will know that there is a variety of mechanics that I once made and then never used. One of these is the wind mechanic, another one of these is the acrobatic objects mechanic, and another one of these is the conveyor belt mechanic. The conveyor belt mechanic is objectively awful and I shall never reuse, but the wind and acrobatic objects are very fun, so I reused those in this level. Realistically, I was originally planning to use the acrobatic objects in the hard mode of the trash trail, but that wouldn't have really made sense or been logical for what I actually want to do with the hard mode levels. Introducing a new mechanic in hard mode levels doesn't really make a whole lot of sense because I would then have to teach that mechanic, and that's not really what I want to do with those levels. So I reuse those objects in the bug brutality level, and I feel like they actually work out very well with the Boid mechanic. I like to make all of my mechanics sort of make sense next to each other, so a lot of the mechanics I try to make in a way where they will have some sort of logical similarity of the mechanics in the level, and I feel like the acrobatic objects and the wind objects work very well with the Boid mechanic, because these are both mechanics that are either going to push the player in a specific direction with the wind, or mechanics that are going to lock the player at a specific position until they actually use the acrobatic object, this being the acrobatic objects. And because of this, it's very easy to have the Boid act as a hazard. For example, I could have an acrobatic pole that the player has to grab onto and then fling themselves from the pole, but then I could also add Boids that will get in the way of the player. So if the player is on the pole for too long, the Boids are going to interact with the player and damage them, so they have to very quickly grab onto the acrobatic pole and then jump off it, otherwise a bunch of Boids are going to smother the player to death and kill them. Finally, we have the actual design of the level, this being that the level is very hard. Pep-Pel really is hard, and I really am sad because of it. This is, again, one of the levels that is progressively getting very, very, very much more difficult in Pep-Pel. There is actual challenge to the game now. The earlier levels I feel like maybe are a bit too simple, but also I'm an epic gamer, so what do I know? But I feel like the bug brutality level and whatever level I made previously are the very beginnings of Pep-Pel being quite a difficult game. The bug brutality level has a whole lot of very difficult sections to it, and I quite enjoyed this. It actually made designing the level quite a bit easier, because all I really had to do was design a method for an actual level section I wanted. For example, maybe moving blocks will launch the player through a section, and then all I had to do is add hazards around this that the player will have to navigate around to get to this task that I want them to perform in each section of the level. Essentially, I just make one very hard section of the level, add a bunch of junk around it, and then I have a level. Realistically, I feel like in old levels I tried to make sort of the mechanics and things you would have to do in sections of the level a bit more open-ended, so the player had more choice, or they could have other things they could do to navigate through the level. But in the harder sections, there is a lot more specificity on what the player has to do to navigate the actual hazards and complete each section. I feel like each section still has multiple things the player can do, and definitely has different methods and techniques the player could incorporate to maneuver difficult sections of the level, but overall I feel like it is certainly more restrictive and focusing on the player actually having to navigate the hard sections of the level, in opposed to just finding their own way around what they have to do. Also, it made it so I had to program a new mechanic of actually tracking the player when they are in the level, and then through testing, I can draw a trail based on this movement the player has made. This mechanic is just something I use when testing, but I find it quite useful. All I really do is similar to the shadow clone mechanic. I create a section of duplicates of Pep-Pel's image visual wherever she has been when testing the level, and then before I finish testing the level, I will just copy all these components and then paste these as new components when I go to actually remake parts of the level, so I can see in playing the level normally exactly where the player has been and where they could travel in a level with their regular momentum. So it is very easy to plan mechanics and hazards and other such things in this path the player has made. Before, I would just make sections of the level, test it, see what works, see what doesn't work, and then change sections of the level in accordance to this. But since the hard section of the level in the bug brutality is a lot more restrictive on what the player can do, I have to actually test specific pathings the player can take in specific instances. So having a mechanic that actually tracks the player to do this, it makes this design process significantly easier for me. And that is it for Devlog. I quite like the bug brutality level a whole lot. I still feel like there is a lot of issues and testing I have to do to really perfect the bug brutality level, but overall I feel like perhaps the amount I have to test for the bug brutality level has felt significantly lesser than in other levels, because in other levels I maybe didn't have the pathing scripting that I discussed that helped me path out where the player can move. So far in actually testing the bug brutality level, there has been less issues than I usually run into, which is definitely reassuring in level design. I'm either getting better at it or worse at detecting issues. My ego has inflated with the hubris of Pep-Pellington, and I no longer concede my faults. Additionally, I also completely forgot to make a devlog about this level. I made a devlog about the bug mechanic, I made a devlog about the new mechanics for the next level I am making, I made several more mechanics that I have not made devlogs for, and then I realized, hey, I haven't made a devlog talking about the bug brutality level. I need to do that. So this level is a little bit older than what I'm currently working on in Pep-Pellington. I'm currently about 1/3 of the way in creating the next final level, which is the last level in Pep-Pel, regular story mode, aside from the difficult optional levels. But the next level is the Meteor Madness level, which, spoilers, real good so far. I'm having a good time making the Meteor Madness level, but I will discuss that in a next devlog. So far, bug brutality, real fun. I hope you like the bug level too, because I like the bug level, and I think it's pretty fun. I'm also surprised how interesting the actual game looks in the silhouetted format. I am a big fan of drawing sprite shapes and sprites for Pep-Pel, but actually just working on color schemes and very blocked out visuals is really interesting. I quite like it. And anyway, devlog over, bye bye!